times. Yeah.
They've never been one.
That's too bad.
Good evening. My name is Gary Darnell. I'm a City of Salem hearings official. For the record, it's about 5:30 on Wednesday, August 12th, 2026. This evening, we have one hearing on the docket. This hearing concerns an appeal of a Historic Landmarks Commission Class 3 Major Historic Design Review decision approving a request to extend the porch of an existing single-family dwelling located at 625 Church Street Southeast. The applicants are Lisa and Andrew Taylor. This is case number HIS 26-05. The approval criteria in this case can be found in section 230.065 of the Salem Revised Code. However, opponents have argued that the applicable criteria are found in Salem Revised Code 230.025 and possibly 040. Before we begin the testimony portion of the hearing, I'd like to describe the rules that we follow during these hearings. The hearings can be characterized as being quasi-judicial and de novo. By quasi-judicial, that means certain due process rights attached to the proceedings, the right to notice, the right to testify, the right to an impartial decision maker, and the right to a written decision that's based on findings of fact and conclusions of law. By de novo, that means you're not limited to the evidence or argument that was made before the Historic Landmarks Commission. Hearing will allow any new evidence or argument that you might have, again, that's relevant and material to the approval criteria. The rules of evidence that you find in a circuit court don't apply here. Basically, evidence that's admissible is that which would be commonly relied upon by a reasonably prudent person, whatever that is, who's in conducting their serious daily affairs. Evidence that's not relevant, not material, overly argumentative, won't be considered by the hearings official. And testimony that is given should be directed towards the approval criteria. Whether or not you agree with the staff or the opponents, you need to focus and aim that evidence towards approval criteria found in the code. It's important to note that you need to raise procedural or substantive issues at this hearing. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and other parties the ability, opportunity to respond to the issue will preclude your ability to appeal that issue to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals. Also, failure by the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue will preclude an action for damages in the circuit court. The burden of proof for each fact or position lies with the party raising those facts or positions. The ultimate burden lies with the applicant to show by a preponderance of the evidence that all applicable approval criteria have been satisfied. The record in this matter consists of the application and supplemental materials submitted by the applicant, the staff report, any other testimony, written testimony received by staff from the public, any written or oral testimony received at this hearing, or if the record is held open, any written testimony submitted during that period of time. By statute, you have the right to request that the record be held open for an additional 7 days. You don't have to give a reason for that request, but you need to make that request before it closes. If there is a request for that, then we determine how long the record will be held open. Normally, the procedure is that we'll allow 7 days for new evidence, then another 7 days for parties to review that evidence and comment on that evidence in writing. And then finally, a week for the applicant to provide final rebuttal testimony. You also have the right to request a continuance of the hearing. That is discretionary with the hearings official. You need to demonstrate that merely holding the record open is not adequate to satisfy your concern. Testimony is electronically recorded so that we ask at the start of your testimony, you give your name. For those that are here at the hearing, we ask that you use the podium for your testimony. And we have sign-up sheets in the back to make sure that you get a copy of my decision if you so choose. In terms of the procedure of the hearing, we begin with a staff presentation. I believe Morris will be presenting the staff report. Following the staff presentation, there'll be an opportunity for the applicant, Ms. Lisa Taylor, to provide testimony, and then others who wish to support the application. Following that testimony, there's an opportunity for a representative neighborhood association to offer testimony. And there's testimony from persons opposed to the application. Thereafter, testimony from those who would rather not be identified as being pro or con to the matter. Conclusion of that testimony, I'll turn to staff and see if they wish to address any of the issues or questions that have been raised. And then finally, the applicant will have an opportunity to sum up the applicant's position. Any person who has standing may appeal my decision to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals. And you need to do that by filing a written review document as provided in ORS Chapter 34, precisely 34.010 through 34.100. Recommend that you attorney in the filing process, but you can represent yourself before the board. As I indicated, process requires that the decision maker in these matters be impartial. In that regard, I'd like to indicate that I've had no ex-parte contacts, nor do I have any actual potential contacts. Ex-parte contact is a communication with the decision maker party that occurs outside this public venue and goes to the merits or substance of. Sometimes you can't avoid those occurrences. In that case, the decision maker needs to communicate to you the nature and substance of that communication and indicate whether or not it has made them biased. Conflicts of interest has to do with whether or not my decision would benefit myself, a family or household member, or a business I'm associated with, or whether my decision would prevent a financial detriment to myself, a family member, household member, or a business I'm associated with. At this time, members can challenge my impartiality, and you reserve the right to do that throughout the proceedings or the jurisdiction of the hearings official to hear this matter. If there are no challenges, I would ask for the staff report.
Lisa Taylor. Lisa Taylor is now joining.
Sure.
You can go to, you're going to want to click on right below.
Sorry. Oh, I see.
Good evening. I'm Jake Morris, Historic Preservation Planner for the City of Salem. I'd like to enter the staff report, its attachments, and all public testimony into the public record.
Well accepted.
The issue before hearings officer tonight is a de novo quasi judicial public hearing to consider affirming the Historic Landmark Commission's decision to grant approval to extend the porch on the front of the house at 625 Church Street Southeast, or to reverse the HLC decision denying the application. Hearings officer can also modify the decision or remand it back to the HLC for further consideration. The property is located at 625 Church Street Southeast and is a contributing resource to the Gaiety Hill Bushes Pasture Park Historic District. The Oregon Historic Site Record from 1986 describes the house as a one-story rectangular bungalow of wood frame construction built around 1920. The house was originally set upon a low foundation. In 2004, an application for a historic design review was submitted by the then owner to raise the foundation of the house, citing a risk of flooding and pre-existing foundation deterioration at the rear of the house, is designated as HIS 0409. The house was raised sufficiently to accommodate a single-car garage. The prominent center staircase was added to allow access. Shallow balconies were created in front of the flanking French doors and resulted in a porch assembly that extended the entire width of the front facade. The left image was from approximately 1978, and the right is the house as it appears currently. The Historic Landmarks Commission held a public hearing on the current request on April 16, 2026. Oral testimony was provided by the applicants, Lisa Taylor and Brian Judd, and Evan West from the Scan Neighborhood Association. After a request by Scan to hold the record open for additional testimony, the HLC continued the public hearing until May 21st of 2026 in order to provide the applicant with additional time to address the concerns brought up by the commission, as well as to provide more time for additional testimony. The HLC opened the public hearing on May 21st, 2026 and continued until June 18, 2026 at the request of the applicant to provide sufficient time to develop an alternative design which better addressed HLC concerns related to the scale of the extended front porch. Historic preservation staff sent out an additional public notice on May 29, 2026 for this case to correct an error that had previously been They had previously been identified by the Neighborhood Association, where the specific applicable criteria were not noted in the notice. The site was also reposted per SRC requirements. Additionally, the applicant at that time extended the 120-day deadline for this case to September 15th of 2026. The applicant met with historic preservation staff on June 3rd, 2026, proposing a revised plan and reducing the proposed front porch projection from 10 feet to 6 feet, and changing the design from a rectangular projection to an angular one, which mirrored the character defining enclosed front entry. Additional renderings and written testimony were submitted on June 8th of 2026. The image at left is a plan view of the original proposal, and the right is the revised proposal. The red area on the right shows where the proposed size was reduced. This is a rendering of the revised proposal provided by the applicant. At their June 18, 2026 meeting, the HLC voted to approve the application. The HLC found that the applicant's revised proposal met the applicable criteria, found that the applicant provided evidence that the current non-original front porches are in poor condition and not currently usable in their current size and configuration, and that alteration was necessary for continued reasonable use of the front porches. The HLC found that the applicant proposed to reduce the size of the porch extension by 4 feet, revise the design to mirror that of the projecting front entry bay, thereby minimizing the potential adverse impacts of this alteration. The HLC found that the proposal to expand the existing non-original front porches will not significantly impact any intact original materials on the exterior of the resource, and the applicant's revised proposal further ensures that the most character-defining feature of the primary facade will not be obscured. The HLC adopted 2 conditions of approval to better ensure that the porch extension is compatible. The applicant the The conditions specify that the applicant paint the entire front porch assembly to match the existing. And the applicant construct the porch balustrade to match the existing one in both design and material. That decision was mailed out on June 23rd of 2026. On July 6th, 2026, the HLC's decision was appealed by Evan West and Christine Shute on behalf of the Scan Neighborhood Association. On July 23rd, 2026, notice to appeal hearing was sent out to the applicant, property owners, and neighborhood association. Individuals have submitted testimony for the record, and all others entitled notice pursuant to Salem Revised Code requirements. Additional justification for the appeal is outlined in the written testimony dated May 5th, 2026. An email from Christine Shute dated July 14th, 2026 states that they do not wish to include in their appeal their previously identified issues of inadequacy of notice or the applicant's lack of application initially under 230.065. The two issues were raised on appeal. First, the appellants state that SRC 230.065 does not apply because the proposed work does not involve preservation, restoration, or rehabilitation activity. And instead, the standards in SRC 230.025 must apply, stating that when the standards are applied to the proposal, it is clear that the proposed work is prohibited. The response is that while the applicant did originally submit an application with a narrative addressing the standards in SRC 230.025, and the initial RFC was set out with this narrative in error, Historic Preservation staff notified the applicant their proposal did not meet the applicable standards and that therefore the guidelines were required for this review as stipulated in SRC 230.020C1, which states that any activity proposed that is not covered by the table or does not meet the specific standards for contributing buildings in SRC 230.025 requires Class 3 major historic design review under either the guidelines for historic contributing resources, SRC 230.065, or the guidelines for non-contributing buildings and structures in SRC 230.070. The applicant subsequently sent an updated narrative addressing the applicable guidelines in SRC 230.065. Historic preservation staff presented findings related to the proposed utilizing the applicable guidelines in SRC 230.065 in the original staff report issued on April 9, 2026 for the first public hearing, which was April 16, 2026. The notice error raised by SCAN was acknowledged by historic preservation staff, and the proposal renoticed on May 29, 2026 with the appropriate reference. The second concern is appellants state that the work needed to repair portions of the two balconies and the stairway on the house does not meet the definition of rehabilitation as defined by SRC 230.005. Response: during deliberations at June 18, 2026 meeting and documented in the findings of the June 23rd HLC decision, the HLC found the proposed work doesn't meet the definition of rehabilitation as defined in SRC 230.005, which states rehabilitation means the process of making possible a compatible use for a historic contributing resource or individually listed resource through repair, alterations, and additions, while preserving those portions or features which convey its historical, cultural, or architectural values. The HLC found the applicant's proposal to repair and expand the existing deck is rehabilitation under this definition, and therefore they were free to demonstrate that their proposal conforms to the guidelines within SRC 230.065. The HLC subsequently found that the applicant met their burden to demonstrate that the proposed alterations are necessary for the reasonable continued use of their property, and further demonstrated that their proposal conforms to the guidelines, which include ensuring the character defining features of the contributing resource continuing to be conveyed. The hearing officer may take one of the following actions: affirm the Historic Landmarks Commission June 23rd, 2026 decision for HIS 2605 and approve the application, or remand the June 23, 2026 decision approving HIS 2605 to the Historic Landmarks Commission for further action, or modify the June 23rd, 2026 decision approving HIS 2605, or reverse the Historic Landmarks Commission's June 23rd, 2026 decision and deny the application. And additionally, on July 24th, 2026, the notice of appeal hearing was sent to all parties entitled to notice pursuant to Salem Revised Code SRC requirements. Because this date was 1 day short of the 20-day notice required under SRC requirements, staff requests the hearings officer either leave the written record open or continue the hearing in order to cure the issue. That concludes my presentation. Thanks for your time.
Ms. Morris, it seems like the applicable approval criteria depend on actually what's being done. So you've got a porch that apparently is in poor condition according to the applicant. Porch is what? Some flooring with some sort of underlying support. What's the physicality of?
Sure. In the house, there was the pre-existing before those porches existed and the house was raised. There was a projecting center porch. And then to each side when it was raised, they put projecting wooden porches. They're free floating, except they are attached to the existing porch on either side. So which created an assembly that extended from one end to the other of the property.
Here's what I'm trying to get at. Is the applicant replacing the existing portion of the porch?
The existing part of the new flanking porch areas. Yes, because they're deteriorated. They're wooden. They have balustrades in front of them that they were put in place in order so that someone could exit the French doors without,
Right.
injury.
But the part of the porch that's in poor condition, is that being replaced?
Yes.
And balustrade is not?
The balustrade as well.
What about the supporting beams?
Like the entire structure of those planking porches are being replaced because of rot. Now they were put in place. They don't have any historic materials in them.
Okay. Term rehabilitation implies that there's going to be some portion of the original remaining. 30.025 implies that this applies to replacements. So it seems to me if the entire structure is being replaced, why doesn't 025 apply?
Under our
None of the original is left.
correct. Usually that refers to the historic materials, but when you so for instance, say they were replacing the center part of the porch, but also let me see. Yeah, under our, sorry, I need to find one more. Under our code and mentioned in the staff report, it says that the applicant can choose whether to do the standards or the guidelines. Let me see where that is. Under 230.02C1. They can choose either the guidelines or the guidelines in lieu of the 0.65.
So get this straight. You're implying that 230.025 applies to just historic components of historic building, and 6.5 allows greater latitude.
The general guidelines, which are 0.65 under class 3, the applicant can choose which one they want to do. And if something doesn't clearly fit the standards, then they will use the guidelines. And this,
The applicant has the choice. Regardless.
right, and this property is unusual in that it has been raised, and so its historic integrity has been impacted, which is what necessitate which is what caused them to have to put those on in the first place. So they were a response to that alteration, and so we have those are there as because of, you know, loss of historic integrity on the property. And so it makes it not as clear as to say the property had never been raised in the first place. Then it would be much clearer on what would be appropriate.
Okay, so under 230.025D, which applies to porches, the applicant needs to demonstrate pairs of these.
That is what it says. And sometimes repair for non-historic aspects of a feature that could be in-kind replacement as well.
Fumbling through this the first time I've had occasion to look at chapter 230. So, okay, thank you.
Ernest, could I add something to that? Well, great. I just want to say about the applicant's choice for standards or guidelines, it also changes the process. So if you meet all the standards, it's administrative. So if you want to have more latitude, you can choose the guidelines and go to the Historic Landmark Commission. An opportunity to kind of make your case about how your proposal conforms, even if it doesn't meet every particular standard. And we used to have that in our code for all the design, not just historic, any zone that had design. So if you meet the standards, staff, if you don't, you would go to Planning Commission under guidelines. And we have that left in our historic code, but.
Yeah, I may ask that the record be held open for additional interpretation by staff. Trying to tie the various standards together and have a little bit confusing. Okay. There are others who wished, well, is the applicant? I need to talk to the applicant. Me, Ms. Taylor?
Yeah, hello.
Fill it. Not the opposite.
Sorry. Thanks.
Hi. Was it the app? I'm sorry.
Yep. Anything, yes, it's your turn.
Okay. Okay, great. Hi. For the record, my name's Lisa Taylor. I'm the owner, along with my husband Andrew Taylor, at 625 Church Street. Thank you for accommodating my virtual appearance here. I'm on a camping trip. I appreciate the staff report and appreciate everyone's time here. I don't have a lot to add, especially around the statute use to the staff report. I think that was well explained. I really just wanted to give kind of the perspective of well, the homeowner, and why we're looking to replace the porches and stairs. Um, as you heard, the house was raised, so obviously it's very different than the historic version of this house. It was in a floodplain, and so raising the house brought it out of the floodplain, which is great. But we do have a very large cement foundation, as you can see in the photos, and we have these two little balcony things outside of our French doors. And when we moved in 4 years ago, there was dry rot in those porches. And after a series of other house improvements that we had to make, we're finally able to replace porches to make them usable. Right now, the porches are about 4 feet deep, which really is not a very usable amount of space for a porch. You can go out there and stand, I suppose, but you really couldn't even fit a chair to sit and be able to move around for the doors and things. So we really were hoping to expand the porches to make them more usable. And when we were thinking about the design, we did want to make sure that we were keeping the integrity of the historic house, front and center. Like, that's why we bought the house. It was historic, it was beautiful. We love the kind of octagonal front sunroom in it, and we wanted to make sure we weren't going to be overshadowing that in any way, while also making the porches obviously safe and usable. So we were really thinking about like what a front porch would look like in this house, and it's hard to really think of. The house has been raised, a historic record of what that front porch would have looked like, because obviously that didn't exist. So what we did, we looked around at existing homes in the Bush Park area to kind of envision what the pre-elevated home might have looked like. We looked at homes with wraparound porches and front patio areas. And we really thought about the house. It's set so far back from the street, and the front yard is so much larger than the backyard. It really seems to me that it was kind of made to have a thriving front yard area, especially being across from Pringle Park, and kind of in more of a like communal neighborhood. So we really wanted to bring back the usability of that front area so that, we could be out in the front part of our house and using that as we think it was originally intended to be used. I really appreciate kind of the process that we've gone through. It has taken a very long time, but I understand. I appreciate that, this process is going to prevent some sort of box modern house from being built next door in the historic neighborhood, which is great. And I understand, we put in our first proposal was a 12-foot rectangular porch that came out from the house. And we really heard from the neighborhood association and the historic commission kind of their potential concerns around that, and what they might prefer seeing. And I think we went back and changed the designs to really have the kind of two separate smaller porches that are connected by a 4-foot walkway that mirrors the same angles as the sunroom. And I think that's going to look really more historically appropriate. It's going to blend into the house more. And I think if anything, it's going to kind of highlight the interesting angle of that front room. And so we appreciate the process, because I think we've really changed the design to kind of address some of the scale and compatibility concerns. And obviously I'm very excited about getting this front porch, if it is approved, because I think it'll really allow us to, like I said, use our front yard more, kind of be out in the neighborhood, watch the neighbors and the park across the street, and kind of be more part of that community. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions about anything. I know that this is a unique situation with this raised home. Obviously, they're not raising a lot of craftsman homes in this area, but we really are interested in maintaining the historic nature of the home. And our goal is by no means to come in and flip our house and sell it off. This is our 30-year home, and we're just hoping to have a nice area to sit and drink our coffee. So happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Taylor, you mentioned that the porch has dry rot, which has to be replaced.
Mhm.
What about the support beams underneath? Are they gonna remain?
You know,
Do they have to be replaced as
I'm
well?
I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if somebody from On Point Fencing is in the room. They might have a better idea. Um, from what I can tell, like when again, I'm not a builder, but when I look up the beams that are supporting those little balconies, it almost seems like they're a continuation of the beams that are inside of the garage. So if you go into the garage, right, that's right there. It seems like the beams just continue out because again, they're 4-foot balconies, so it doesn't take too much. But I would be interested in looking into that because I couldn't tell you from here. And I'm also not sure if they have dry rot in them or if it's just more of the plank and, you know, parts of the deck.
What's the condition of the stairway?
Oh yeah, the stairs are also pretty dry rotted, so that those definitely need replacement at all. And I would say all parts of the stairs. I have little confidence in any parts of those stairs.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there others in the audience who wish to testify in support of the application? I'd like to hear from the representative of the neighborhood association.
Can I remove this keyboard
Yes, ma'am.
and maybe the mouse? Thanks. Good evening. My name is Christine Shute. I'm speaking on behalf of the Neighborhood Association, SCAN, South Central Association of Neighbors, and we're also the appellant in this matter. Our preferred outcome is that the hearing officer would reverse the decision of the Historic Landmarks Commission and deny the permit. In the alternative, we would suggest remand to the HLC to better articulate its reasoning for reasons that I'll get into in a second. SCAN's first concerns are stated in our supplemental response to the Historic Landmarks Commission, and that appears in this packet that we all got. It's after the request for review, or after the appeal notice, the last few pages of this packet. Our concerns are very easy to understand. We disagree with the Historic Landmarks conclusion that the proposed extension of this existing non-historic deck falls within the definition of rehabilitation. And secondly, we can't figure out from the HLC's decision itself how it reached that conclusion, a conclusion that does not seem to be in the decision supported either by findings of fact or by reasoning. So we're left to sort of guess how they got from point A to point B. And we would really like, we're trying to find our way through this because this historic district is within our neighborhood. And a lot of our SCAN members live in that historic district, and we need to understand what the rules are. In addition, we are always given a special opportunity, aside from the general public, to comment on these things. And so we're just trying to find our way through here. Our first argument, as I said, hinges on the definition of rehabilitation in SRC 230.005. And so I'm going to read the relevant language to you. Not all that whole thing, but just the part that we're focusing on. Okay, great, thanks. Rehabilitation means the process of making possible a compatible use for a historic contributing resource. Now, this bears emphasizing making possible a compatible use. The implication in this case being that without the extended deck, use as a single family home is not possible. To state that notion is almost to refute it. Use as a residence is currently possible with no need for any deck expansion. Perhaps some repairs might be in order. Those can take place under SRC 230.020, does not require any historic landmark, any review for design, historic design or anything. So repairs could go forward easily. So what we're really talking about here is the homeowners, understandable, sure, desire to have a different deck design than they currently have, but they need to demonstrate that this falls within the definition of rehabilitation in order to get in the door of 065. The two small decks that are on there have been in place since, give or take, 2005. And there's no evidence that this house has ever been uninhabitable due to the size and shape of those decks. Note that the decision itself does not say, or that the definition itself does not say that rehabilitation means work that seems reasonable or useful or convenient or consistent with a compatible use. It needs to make the compatible use possible, which implies, to my mind, that the compatible use is not possible without the work. And that's plainly inaccurate. Now, Scan made this, you have a question on your face.
No, I'm just thinking, going through the subsections of 230.065. There's different aspects of the structure that are highlighted. So I'm not sure why rehabilitation has to be associated with the entire dwelling.
Oh,
It calls out porches specifically, and that to me seems to indicate that rehab can be focused on any one of those structural components.
I get your point, and I'll call your attention to the definition of rehab that is in 005. Rehabilitation means the process of making possible a compatible use, not for porches, but for a historic contributing resource. The only historic contributing resource in this matter is the house. The porches aren't historic, and they certainly aren't contributing. So rehabilitation means that something has to make the important historic building itself useful. And it can take it, though that can be done through, if the definition continues, repair, alterations, and additions. So that if this is in fact rehabilitation, in other words, if it makes the house of use, they could alter or add to it, no question about that. And that's why we're not talking about the criteria that underneath that fall underneath the entry door in 065, if I'm making myself clear. The Scan made this argument before the Historic Landmarks Commission, and the Historic Landmarks Commission nevertheless concluded that the proposed work constitutes rehabilitation. We don't really know why, because they didn't tell us. And here's what they did say about it. They say that the HLC further finds that the proposed work does meet the definition of rehabilitation as defined in SRC 230.005, which states, and then it gives the definition. And after that says, the HLC finds that the applicant's proposal to expand the existing deck is rehabilitation under this definition, and therefore they are free to demonstrate that they conform to the guidelines. The HLC finds that it's the applicant's burden of proof to show that the alterations are necessary for the continued reasonable use of their property and further demonstrate that it conforms to the guidelines. So what they've done in this paragraph in the disguise of findings is concluded in the same thing in 2 or 3 different ways that it constitutes rehabilitation without telling us why. Is it because the deck is not good enough to go out and have a cup of coffee on in the morning? Is that why? Is it because there's dry rot in some of the planking on the top of the deck? We just don't know. And it's their job to tell us. It's not our job to guess. We should know. Now, it doesn't really even address our argument. It just says that the expanded deck is quote unquote necessary. So why, in light of the ongoing use of this house, since those little balcony things were added in about 2005, has been used as a house since about 2005 with those decks there, why is it suddenly needed to be expanded to make that use possible? That just makes no sense to us. And the order, as I said, doesn't really tell us. Now, you asked earlier about original versus new, whether all of the underlay of the beams would have to be replaced. And I don't think that really makes much difference because the question is whether the house is usable. And if the house is not usable, they can replace whatever they need to replace. The definition of rehabilitation, I agree with you. Normally, when we think of rehabilitation, we think of fixing something, not replacing it.
Right, but if you go back to 025, it talks about replacement.
Yes, but and I agree with staff that the homeowner just has the choice. They can do this or they can do that, and whatever reason drives them to make that choice doesn't really matter for purposes of this analysis. At least that's the way I'm reading the code. Granted, I am no expert. This is like you. This is my first rodeo, so to speak. So I think our argument is fairly clear and fairly easy to understand. But if you have questions, I'm really happy to answer them.
No, I think you've addressed some of the things I was considering.
Okay, I just wanted to take a minute to make some comments that don't specifically relate to our argument, if you'll indulge me. Although HLC didn't accept our arguments, this proceeding really has never felt adversarial to us. We've been very happy with Mr. Morris's professionalism and his ability to explain things to us and to keep us in the loop. So we really appreciate that. And our opposition to this deck, I know it must be stressful and irritating, probably at the very least, for the homeowners. This position reflects our concerns over the interpretation and application of 230, Chapter 230, that we were involved with on an ongoing basis. And sometimes the way it's applied seems mysterious to us. And so we're trying to get our arms around it. And one of the things I think we're hoping to do in the future is to drive the HLC to do a better job of telling us what they're doing. So thank you.
Clarify what the code says as well.
Sure. Yeah. And I think if they decide to put together, if they decide to make some changes to the code, if that seems to be required, I'm sure we'd be glad to help out with that. Thank you.
Now, is there testimony from opponents? Those who would wish to speak in opposition?
I'll step up first. We have, I think, maybe two more who arrived just a little bit late who might also wish to speak. So I will keep my own time as condensed as possible. Thank you. I'm Evan West. I reside in Ward 7. I'm also part of the Scan Neighborhood Association, which has brought this appeal. I'm here today as an expert witness of sorts. I hold a master's degree in historic preservation from the University of Colorado, and I've worked in the field for more than a decade now. Preservation language can be confusing if it's not familiar to you, so I'm here to help make it as painfully clear as possible. There have been some unintentional red herrings that have emerged. Really, the totality is much more simple than what has been presented, I believe. Not every community benefits from the presence of a robust historic preservation code. Federal standards and guidelines don't automatically apply to all situations. But in Salem, we're fortunate to have an in-depth code which regulates, among other things, buildings that are listed as eligible contributing in a historic district. And that's what this building in question is tonight. Almost any other discussion of historic time period, change in character over time is moot. It is an eligible contributing building in a National Historic District, and that's how Salem Revised Code treats it. Under the standards for eligible contributing properties, the type of work applied for is not allowed, period. The application process has hopes to, frankly, just get around that requirement by saying that it qualifies as rehabilitation. But to me, there's a glaring problem with that, which is that the definition of rehabilitation is clear. We've talked about that substantially tonight already. In Salem Revised Code, rehabilitation means the process of making possible a compatible use. Now, importantly, that definition mirrors the definition from the federal government almost word for word. And when we talk about rehabilitation and making compatible use possible, that means a change in use of the property. In this case, single residential does not change. That's an industry standard. We're not converting this to a cafe. It's not becoming a multifamily dwelling. The use as a single family dwelling remains the same. There are also similar definitions for preservation and restoration that have very specific usage. Those do not apply here. But while we're talking about definitions, I want to point out, staff keeps referencing the work in question as a porch. There are very specific definitions for porches and decking. This is not a porch, this is a deck that is in question here. Decking, once again, is very specifically not allowed in the front of a contributing eligible house in a historic district under SRC 230.025. So, what if access was damaged, if there's dry rot, if something needs to be repaired? Well, there's another definition that allows ensured access to continue, and that's ordinary maintenance and repair, which, quote, utilizes in-kind materials and restores, replicates, and sustains the existing form. We're empathetic to the property owners, but thanks to the Salem Code, they knew that they were purchasing a house in a regulated historic district, and that their ability to conduct essential functions, including repair, would not be restricted, but new construction, which is proposed, is in fact restricted. So I agree with what has been said, which is that the language is clear and objective, and the product is not rehabilitation, and that SRC 230.065 cannot be construed to be applicable in this case. I believe there's already been a request to hold the record open, but I'm going to reiterate that. Thank you, and I believe that reaches the end of what I wanted to be sure I said in response to some of what's been said already, but I now remain available to answer questions, as I said, an expert in the historic preservation field.
We are going to keep the record open, so during that time, I'd appreciate it if you could provide the citations,
Sure.
especially the difference between the deck and the porch. Code doesn't, I don't believe, defines deck. Maybe wrong, but I don't think so.
In the Salem Revised Code, the difference matters just a little bit in terms of what the design is and what the location on the house is.
But federal standards do.
Yes, that's correct.
I'd like to see
Sure,
the difference in those two.
absolutely. Any other questions at this time before I also my colleagues to comment?
Who'll be next?
Yes, ma'am. Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. First, I want to apologize. The door was locked and I couldn't get in. So, and there wasn't a sign up sheet when I came in. For the record, my name is John Christensen. Professionally, I have a professional degree in city planning, and I have monitored historic preservation in the city of Salem since 1980. And I'm familiar with cases that have come before the commission and also administrative and decisions. And this is one of those circumstances where it kind of reaches a point that clarification is needed. And that's why individuals with very solid professional backgrounds and experience and legal experience have come before a hearings officer to get the clarification. I support the recommendation of the Historic Preservation Parks and Gardens Committee, chaired by Ms. Shute, and also the president of SCAN, Evan West. Okay, and I also want to compliment the staff. I've worked with staff, and I think they generally do an excellent job. There are points of disagreement that occur, and I have sent written testimony to the case manager earlier this evening, which I would like to have entered into the record. I'd also like to have the opportunity, please, for review of the comments that were made today for an allowance of the record to be open for a reasonable amount of time, please. Okay.
Be clear, you're testifying in support of the opponent's position.
Yes,
Okay.
the appellants,
Yes,
okay, which are the South Central Association of Neighbors. Thank you, sir. And I apologize if it wasn't clear.
and the record will be held open and there'll be an opportunity
Sir, can I ask,
for new evidence and then a opportunity for those to review the new evidence in writing.
thank you. Thank you. I think I'll leave it there. Have you made a decision, sir, on the length of that open record?
Not yet, it's usually 7 days, 7 days, 7 days. Unless somebody has a good argument for a longer period of time.
Okay, does that follow the provisions under ORS 197 with regard to the 7 days?
777.
797, I think 7632, I'm not sure. I think they amended the laws
They did, they moved the
in 2000.
citation.
Yes. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time. And thank you to staff. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm Carlene Benson, 545 Leslie Street Southeast. I live in the Gaiety Hill neighborhood, and I have for almost 40 years. Oh, let me back up. I need to say one thing about the 625 house. The French doors on each side of the door, the main door, those originally were windows, French windows, and the previous owner turned them into doors. So that matters. Anyway, back to 40 years. Over 40 years, we've come before the commission. I thought the commission would be here. So many times. And I can think of one time that they protected us, that they helped us. And that was when they wanted to put parking meters on Church Street, parking meters in a historic district. So we're glad they did that. But usually what happens is that, and there's so many times we don't come before the commission because there's no point. Usually what happens is staff does their thing and then the commission rubber stamps it. And I wish you guys would just put me out of my misery and do away with the historic district. Do away with the historic district and do away with the commission, because there's no point. And I have spent 40 years protecting as best I could that neighborhood. And it just doesn't matter. There's illegal doors, illegal fences, illegal windows, illegal, what did I see the other day? Oh yeah, right across the street. The house has been, all the siding has been removed and they're gonna put hardy plank. They didn't go through the commission. You know, so I'm gonna complain, but I assume what will happen is they will, after the fact, the city will, after the fact, make a decision, and I doubt they'll have to they didn't make a chance, try to make it look like cedar. That's what they took off as a cedar sign, and that is available. So I just needed to share my pain.
I guess that's what I'm here for. There are others who wish to testify in opposition to in support of the appeal, in opposition. There's no do-overs, but go ahead.
3 years ago, there was a daycare, owner occupied daycare, and that's fine. Owner occupied is fine. Now they own three houses that families don't live in, you know, and we're a small neighborhood, you know, three houses taken out of the stock, the housing stock. And, you know, there it goes. And we went before the commission, we appealed it, we went to city council and we lost, which is what usually happens. So.
Again, are there others who wish to testify in opposition? There are those who would just like to make comments or questions, but would rather not be identified as being in favor or opposed to the appeal. Seeing no one, I'll look to staff to see if they wish to make any comments at this time.
I have a few comments I'd like to make, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I wanted to, we've had some testimony speaking to the Secretary of the Interior standards and the federal definitions, because as a certified local government, one thing that we're required to do is be generally in line with what they describe, and that's kind of how the federal system works. And so under that, they have 4 different treatments. There's reconstruction, which is it burned down and we're building another one, right? There's restoration, which is like it's very deteriorated, but we want to make it exactly like it was. So if you had a log cabin under restoration, you couldn't do things like add water if it didn't have it, add electricity. Is very strict, you know. So that would be something that's appropriate for like a house museum or something where you wouldn't need it to have everyday use in the same way. And then we have, so restoration is that, but rehabilitation are the standards that are used most often in day-to-day preservation work because they accommodate change. If it doesn't accommodate any change whatsoever, then you're looking at a restoration under the treatments. And the way you can see that with the federal guidelines is when they do things like historic preservation tax credits to certify that a property is a rehabilitation, they need to make sure all the changes are appropriate. And they use that using the Secretary of the Interior standards, and then they have guidelines, which is inverse from how planning usually defines those two things. And the guidelines kind of lay out in specific terms how to deal with what the standards are saying. And they generally track what our guidelines do. And so inherent in rehabilitation is that there is some change accommodated. And so what we see in those situations is like the most often you'll see that used in section 106 where there's a federal undertaking and they want to make sure something's appropriate, but also in the historic preservation tax credit program. And in that program, they will have changes of use, right? So you have a mill building and you want it to become apartments, right? You can make a lot of changes and still keep the character if you follow the guidelines. But one thing that's notable is continued use is regularly inherently a compatible use. If you have an apartment building and you want to rehabilitate it under federal guidelines, and it's relevant to us because we have the same definition of the restoration and rehabilitation as the federal government. And so in historic preservation, the way we understand that is if you're not doing some changes, it's a restoration. And if you have a compatible use, inherent in that would be that the use, if it's the same use, it's inherently a compatible use. So if you have an apartment building and it's deteriorated and they do a certified rehabilitation, it can still be an apartment building. It's just one that is functional and has the working aspects of an apartment building and meets current code, you know. I just wanted to clarify those two things because they speak to why the Historic Landmarks Commission may have decided how they view rehabilitation. Yep. So that's all I had.
Is Ms. Taylor still on the line? Ms. Taylor, you have an opportunity now
Great.
to summarize, provide rebuttal. Also, the record's going to be held open. And I'm personally really interested in a more definitive description of what the actual work is going to entail. And I know you're on vacation, so it may be that 7 days isn't sufficient for you to respond. So I guess I need some feedback from you as to how much time would be necessary for you to provide that sort of information.
Yeah, so I've been joined by crying children, so sorry about that. We're actually back tomorrow, so 7 days is perfectly fine by me. I can get you pictures of the underside of the porch. I'll talk to our builders about whether or not those like trusses, I think they're called, are going to be remaining or if they're original. I think the only additional information I kind of have is I again really appreciate the staff's work on this. Kimberly came out and took a look at the porch and kind of gave us recommendations on the new designs and thought those were more appropriate and was very helpful. It kind of seems to me that folks are having trouble with the code's applicability here because we're in a very unique situation of something that happened for us, and this is the first word doors original. No one's ever told me that. Just look for pictures. So I think that it's really a matter of maybe this code, this isn't the average situation, and that's causing people concern. But I really don't know what should be on the homeowners because this code, I don't need to from our foot additional porch, but I really do think it's gonna
Okay. Sounds like 777 is appropriate. That means all parties have 7 days to supplement the record with additional written comments, evidence, argument. The next 7 days, parties can review the written statements placed into the record and again, comment again on those. Then finally, there'll be a week for the applicant for final summary or rebuttal. I would really like to see staff take an opportunity to address in a little more detail the definition of rehab. Stan has put a lot of emphasis on, the first sentence, basically compatible use, and implying that the rehabilitation has to be associated with preserving that function. And quite frankly, this was a fairly confusing situation based on how the code is written. It really addresses the issues as clearly as it could. So, does anybody have any objection to those timeframes?
So 7 days, sorry. For the record, this is Christine Shute again from SCAN. So 7 days, everyone will have 7 days to submit additional information, and then staff will send that out to everybody who testified tonight, and then we'll have 7 days after they do that. So I'm assuming they're gonna send it out the day they get it or something like that.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That's great.
So make sure that if you want that information, you have your email address on the sign-up sheet.
Sorry, this is Lisa. I'm sorry, my internet's unstable. So we're looking at 14 additional days before we're getting a opinion, or
Now, yeah, we're looking at first 7 days to
Mhm,
provide new evidence into the record.
Mhm.
Yourself, staff, all parties. The next 7 days allows all parties to review that new information and comment in writing. Then you have 7 days if you choose to take those 7 days for final written rebuttal. Once the record closes, I'll begin my deliberations and usually have my decision out within, well, less than a week. So those are pretty much the ballpark timeframes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions regarding the procedures? If not, we're adjourned. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, yeah.
John does.
Want to add your email address, John?
I don't know why I didn't raise your hand. Historic preservation.